Welcome to What Is She Thinking? It is I, Melanie Marshall, and
Dr. Heather Collins.
we are here for Failure is Not a Gift. Everyone goes on and on. It is Instagrammable, LinkedInable for sure, about what a gift it is to fail forward, to fail fast, to fail often. And we're here to tell you it sucks, it hurts, it's not so great. And today we want to talk about how it feels when you fall flat on your face. I have done it so many times in a million different ways as a human, as a leader, in war zones. And even today, I'm currently on a rocking chair because I broke my chair.
If you see Melanie rocking back and forth, it's not a coping mechanism today. It's a rocking chair.
Yeah, it's like, let me tell you a story about the olden times when I failed real good. That is what I'm doing. But it just goes to show we fail all of the time. And I do think there's definitely lessons. I think we can grow from it. I believe all of that. But I think there's there's going to be this very unhealthy culture of lionizing it as an immediate growth moment. And I just wonder what you think about that, Heather.
I mean, the truth is, ideally, we would love for that to happen, but that's not actually how the brain works. In order for failure to be a growth moment, some very specific things have to happen. And I have a feeling we're going to get into that.
Oh, I wonder if it'll involve the hippocampus.
Most things do.
Most things do involve the hippocampus. And my personal favorite, the amygdala.
Oh, we're definitely talking about that.
We're going to talk about the amygdala. So I like to say that there are three different types of failure. There's failure by life. So that is when something happens to you, right? Your business fails because the economy blows up due to a war in the Middle East, or because you're in the Middle East and your business blows up. I've been there. The idea of like a moral failing, when you fail yourself. You fail the standards that you want to live up to as a human being, or a leadership failing, right? Where you are in charge of a team, leading other people, and you drop the ball. And like all of these things are going to happen in life, I think, if we're being honest. And so there's three different kinds, right? And I think it is important to name them, and it is important to acknowledge that they can be handled differently and learned from differently, I would say. So, I mean, obviously I sort of, was like, hey, should we talk about things blowing up first? But it's, as you know, I like to.
It's your special area.
It is. But, the thing I wanted to tell folks about and tell you about is like not one of the first major failures I've had, but war zones were my backup. Did you know war zones were my backup plan?
Well, most people don't generally go barreling forward to war zones as a first thing. Some people do. And you strike me as the kind of person who might have done that. But I'm curious about how war zones were your backup.
Okay, so
is it because your hip hop career failed?
Do you know what? If only. Okay, quick digression. You got it. Quick digression. Things that are failures. I once saw Ice-T on a street in Toronto. Yes, right?
Hello.
This is before SUV, right? This is before SVU. Sorry, this is before SVU. This is when he was like, I'm your pusher. And I thought he was super cool. And I was wearing like a jersey button-down dress and a leopard print scarf. I remember this outfit so clearly. And Ice-T is on the street, and I look at me, say to him, yo, what's up, man? That, my friend, is a failure that sticks in your mind.
I need to know how he responded.
What's up?
You know what? I'm going to take it. I'll take it.
I'm sure it didn't stick with him, but yet today I'm still telling you this one.
The fact that he responded, I think that's a win.
No, failure is not a gift. Okay, that was not a gift.
This could have gone a different way where he looked at you like you were crazy and kept walking, and he didn't.
Look, I still think, anyway, yeah, okay, fine. But see, you're doing the thing. You are doing the thing that people do with failure, which is, now granted, that was many years ago, which is you're putting the silver lining on it. And sometimes loss is loss.
You can experience loss and hurt and trauma and failure and still have a silver lining. Those things are not mutually exclusive.
Oh, and you listen, I'm the hope girl. You know, I know that, but I'm talking about when we do it. I'm teasing you, but I'm teasing you, but I'm saying it because it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show. When we do it immediately, when somebody has an experience of real loss, and the immediate response is to try and turn it around into a silver lining.
And worse than that is when it happens, as you mentioned earlier, publicly in social media, as if this is something to be capitalized on in a public way. Yeah. And it's almost dealt with as if failure is trite and fleeting and passing and not something to be felt deeply.
Not something to be felt deeply. So when I was a young woman, I came up with an idea for a global media company. It was after I just started with the BBC, but I really wanted to tell the world about stories. And it was actually a really innovative tech company. However, what I cared about using the tech for was to tell stories about the world and connect people to the world. For that, I won a venture capital competition for young women on the day I graduated university. And I was, at that point, I think I had a very unhealthy relationship with failure. I thought I had to win at everything or fall off the cliff, right? But it was, and this was the year 2000. For those of you keeping score, you can probably jump ahead to what's coming. It was incredibly difficult. I partnered with a VC firm, not a media company. I was ahead of my time in the tech, in my desire to do video streaming. And they essentially wanted to like strip the tech for parts, and I wanted to do the media. Also, they were going broke. So I never got the money, and I was way out front in the media. I had been put everywhere. This is before social media, really, but I was all over mainstream media, newspapers, TV, radio, as the CEO. And I, in my people-pleasing way, was being followed by a Canadian business program, and I'd said to them, to please them, I've written a pretty big check with my mouth. Let's see if my ass can cash it. When the company that was funding me went bust, and everything fell apart, and this venture piece came out, including that clip, and using Big Time by Peter Gabriel. I had such a sense of shame and failure, and people talked to me about it everywhere. My great uncle's funeral, everywhere. Everywhere I went, people talked to me about this. And I was so ashamed. I basically wanted to change my identity. And instead of taking it didn't feel like a gift at all. It didn't feel like something I could learn from. It didn't feel like something that I could take lessons from. I'd been asked to come to Davos by the World Economic Forum for my ideas. But I felt that because I had failed, I should basically crawl under a rock. And I tell that story because I really understand what it is like when something goes kablooey. And I think what I wish I could tell my younger self was to nurse the wound, but not stay in the wound, right? And not to believe everything you see on TV, which is hilarious considering what I ended up doing. So it's funny. I'm telling that story as a starting one because it was a big failure. And it changed the course of my life. In the end, in a really beautiful and amazing way. However, if I had known how to process that and move through it, I think I could have taken more out of it. And maybe it wouldn't have taken me so long to come back to, being my own bad self in charge of my own company. I don't know. Thoughts, questions? I saw you writing notes there. I thought, oh God.
I was so many thoughts and questions, and it's interesting. So, listeners and viewers, friends, Melanie has these great stories, and I often have some notes I take when she's talking. I have so many things going through my mind about how this is related to how our brains work and how we can use how our brains work to help us in our lives. So first of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. Good grief. How awful. And, especially when we're young, these failures feel so big and so monumental because we simply don't have that many of them under our belts. And our experience with failure is a lot newer and fresher when we're young. And we have less experience rolling with the punches and overcoming failure. And I want to reiterate what you said earlier, which is that failure hurts. And we're not here to tell you that, it's great and it's amazing. We can learn from it, but it hurts. And that's what we want to share with you. It's okay for failure to hurt. And it's okay for you to not bounce back right away. And I would argue that you need to take time to process in order to bounce back. Your brain cannot shift from being hurt and completely decimated as a human and just feeling gut punched to, oh, these are the lessons I learned. Let me move forward and conquer. Those things take time. That migration takes time and a little bit of effort. And the hard part, and it sounds like you experience this too, is that we want to be able to migrate from rumination to reflection.
Love
and
that.
Those things are different. Those are really different. So rumination involves something we've heard and talked about before, your default mode network. And it kind of gets looped in this looping pattern. And your default mode network is it's involved in a lot of things. We see it really active when you're not necessarily doing anything specific. You're not talking with a friend. You're not reading a novel. You're not doing my favorite thing and working on an Excel spreadsheet. It's kind of just when you're not doing much. And so you can see that rumination tends to happen in these moments, right? When our attention doesn't have anything else specific to be focused on. Now, the hard part is that it can get caught in a loop with your default mode network, so that you just keep ruminating over and over and over again. And as we talked about, your brain operates off of use it or lose it. And the things that you use the most become strengthened. So what happens is that rumination pathway, instead of being a 2-lane country bumpy road, if you get stuck there, it can become a 6-lane highway in your brain. And that's when the challenge happens. It also increases anxiety, depression, sadness.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is that. So the question I would ask, sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but I want you to jump to this a little bit, is because I would agree. I think back then it was a loop. It was a loop for me that stayed in the background over years of huge success, right? Huge success, winning awards, international awards, top of my game. But there was a loop in the back about that type of experience that kept me from trying something similar again. That was still a rumination. How do you move it to reflection? What's the move?
Well, yeah, one of the first things you have to do is that rumination is also associated with a lot of feeling and emotion. And that is, my friend Melanie knows this, what's involved in emotion?
The limbic system or the amygdala? I don't know which way you're going to go.
The amygdala is part of the limbic system. And actually, so is the hippocampus. So when we get, we feel very emotional. And by the way, it's normal to feel emotional about big failures. That's okay. Allow yourself to sit in that. Allow yourself to feel that. But try to figure out when it's time to try to make yourself do something else. And the thing is, when you're in that moment of, we hear a lot about cognitive overload. Failure can cause emotional overload in your brain. That's what can happen. And then it hijacks your brain's prefrontal cortex, and you're not able to think about what happened. And if you can't think about what happened, you can't learn from it. So sit in that moment, have your rumination, be emotional, and give yourself a little bit of time to feel that. And then, depending on how long you need, find a way out. Now, finding a way out, you might actually have to trick your brain into moving away from rumination. And that could be by getting some of those good brain chemicals going. So going for a run and getting some endorphins, going for a hike in the woods and enjoying nature, getting some oxytocin by petting your pet, your favorite fur baby, for a few minutes, eating some dark chocolate, getting some serotonin, talking with a good friend. So by doing something like that, you increase the production of these positive chemicals in your brain. You're going to calm down your limbic system a little bit. You might still feel a little bit of hurt, but you know what? You can move forward with a little bit of hurt and pain, as long as it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that is the key, that idea of emotional overwhelm, which shuts us down and keeps us from moving forward. And if we can learn to bring that down a little bit, then, and I always like to bring in other people, because we are social creatures. And when we can, one of the reasons I will tell you all of my stories of failure is because when we take away the stigma, not the like it felt great, but the I actually stayed in it too long part, then I think we can start to rewrite these stories and retell these stories and frame them differently. And that helps us to process it, really process it. And then we can begin to move forward. But I wanted to say, like, one of the things that, there are times when, like, because I think, we don't want to stay in it forever.
Right.
But there are times when feeling bad is the right response, right? Sometimes we're feeling bad because, sometimes we're feeling bad just because life is hard. So, and I do want to, can you please make sure we get back to, I know we're talking to other people about don't feel too bad, but I want to talk about how sometimes you should, like, sometimes let's talk about the world, right? People who are experiencing really tough things.
Yeah.
But sometimes other people are experiencing really tough things. But sometimes it is you who has screwed up, really. Sometimes you have genuinely, like, it's not just something as, ballsed up, and you have to eventually get through your emotional pain and figure out how you could do something different. It is that you made a mistake. Like, I love the Yiddish saying, the Hebrew saying, that in Israel we say, if two people tell you you're drunk, lie down. And it means, like, if you're really sure of something and two people are like, you're getting this wrong, you should assume you're probably getting it wrong, which can be a failure. And I know I failed in leadership numerous times when I was so sure I was right about something. And my job was to never fail, right? We used to say failure is not an option, because you have to make the news and you've got to keep people alive. That was my job.
But yeah, and there are consequences if you fail.
There are consequences if you fail, but there are also consequences if you treat people around you as if failure is not an option. Right? So there are definitely consequences, and I was excellent at not failing, right? Again, life story. Excellent at not failing. At things I did, right? Holding together wires on the deck during a hurricane, right? And managing to get a satellite feed together with a Spanish speaking team, English speaking engineer, and me, who didn't speak Spanish and didn't speak satellite engineer, on the border with Haiti. Things like this, where failure wasn't an option. 5 minutes to go. You've got to make it happen. But sometimes in doing some of those things, I developed neural pathways that were that the only thing that mattered was success. And it meant I ran roughshod over people's feelings. I ran roughshod over other people's failings or inabilities to act the same way. And it took real reflection and work to become a better leader. And that required when two people tell you you're drunk, lie down, it required me to really slow down and listen to what people were saying, even when it was hard. And it's a balance, right? I listened too much when Venture told me I was crap, but there were times where I listened too little. And
yeah, it's absolutely a balance, and striking that balance is really difficult. And in some situations, it might be easier, and in some situations, it might be more difficult.
Well, yeah. So, it's like during one of our what now look like quaint smaller wars in the Middle East, I was
quaint smaller wars. Okay, you got me. Continue.
By comparison, right? By comparison. I was on no sleep, so was everyone else. I was doing my best to keep everyone going, and my job is to see the picture, keep everyone going, keep the plan. But I had one person tell me, who was not a high performer, tell me I was shutting people down. And I thought, okay, well, they just aren't pulling their weight. And I then, a day later, had somebody come in and sit down in the room with me, and highest performer. And we were chatting, we were planning editorial stuff. And I could tell there was something on their mind, because I could feel it, because I was paying attention, because I was present, because I was slowed down. And I said, what is it? And they said, well, I don't want to say anything because I know you're doing everything to take care of us. And I said, no, you've got to say it. And they said, well, you are so determined, like you're so in charge. I feel like you're not hearing us. And I heard that. Two people had told me I was drunk. And I had to change how I was leading. I had to sit back and think, okay, and this is the middle of a war, right? And so I had to think, okay, what am I doing? How can I change it? And I did, right? The next day it was like, and I ate crow, or humble pie, or whatever you eat when it was not hummus, it was not delicious hummus. I had to say at the meeting, look, I know I have been pushing really hard, and I have been giving marching orders. And I'm sorry. I know that's been a little shutting people down. I'm going to try to make sure I'm hearing everybody a bit better. So let's do it. And it was a great leadership lesson for me. But definitely there were times where I failed people. I think probably in that way. And that's my job. That was not a gift for them, right? It eventually became a gift for me.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard when we feel like we're not only harming ourselves or causing hurt or pain to ourselves, but also other people. And the thing that struck me in this is you talked about actually shifting from rumination to reflection. And I think the thing that is striking about this story is, in order to shift from rumination to reflection, as we talked about, you have to kind of decrease your emotional response so that you're not overwhelmed and overloaded emotionally. But then you actually need to be goal directed and a little bit structured. Yes. And this was a situation in which you did not have a lot of time. You had overnight to do this. And so you really had to take a moment and think, put yourself in a position where you could think and engage your prefrontal cortex instead of your emotional system, and say, okay, I have to think about what I can do tomorrow and to make this better. And this is a real case of failure leading to change and leading to behavioral change. And whether you knew it or not, when you went the next day and you interacted with people, your brain treated that as a reward, and you actually activated your brain's dopaminergic reward system.
What?
Because changing that behavior as a result of experience or failure means that you were interacting with people in a different way, and your brain took note of that. Your brain took note of that. And so that's a small neurobiological win. And it's those
I love it when you say neurobiological.
It's those small neurobiological wins and those small shifts that can really add up to big effects and big changes with this. And by the way, this is how experience turns into judgment. That's through your hippocampus. You made a memory of this experience and you learned and gained judgment because you made a meaningful memory of that experience with your hippocampus. And I love this story, and there are different kinds of pain and different kinds of failure. And I'm really curious about this one. You kind of gave us a tease about sometimes you're supposed to feel bad based on what's going on in the world. So what's going on with that?
I think when I say that, it's that sometimes loss is loss, and it's loss that you can't come back from. And, we lose people. I've lost people that I have worked with and cared about. I have had to tell people that someone that they cared about deeply has passed. And it's a different kind of failure, but it is like a failure of life, right? Failure by life. And I think about the people I've known, and I think about my friend, the Gaza correspondent, whose home that he had worked for and, built and loved was destroyed, and it's destroyed and it's gone. And that is loss. And it's, these are the kinds of, it's a big, writ large version of when we lose our jobs, or when we have the health crisis, or when we screw up something, right? Something goes wrong, because that's what failure is, right? Something is going wrong. And we wish we could control it, and we can't. And we should feel bad because it is lost and it cannot be undone. And what bothers me sometimes with all of the failure is a gift is not that we can't learn from it and rise, because fundamentally I have learned that we can survive anything and come through anything. And I know that. It lacks compassion. It risks a real lack of compassion for the people we are beside, the people we work with, or people who have worked for us, when the people in other parts of the world who cannot control it, people who are in poverty and can't come back up, right? When the house gets foreclosed on and they cannot just go and buy a new one. For me, I don't mean to be ranty, but it's like, we should feel bad. And if there is a lack of compassion, because we're all pretending that nothing hurts and we can just breeze on through it, I don't know that we learn how to build a better future. Like, I don't know that then we're learning how to build better businesses, how to build better policy, how to build better society, because it's also surface.
I agree with you completely, and I'm going to take it a step further.
All right.
If you don't feel bad about failure, your brain cannot learn from it.
Boom.
When you fail, there's an area of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, and this little guy is your error detector. Like, ooh, something's wrong. And that's an alert, like, oh, something's wrong. I need to act on this. I need to figure this out. And if you don't have an alert go off because of failure, now failure is error detection, right? Something went wrong. We should make a note of that. If your brain doesn't engage in that process because you think failure is completely okay and that you don't have to feel bad about it, that alert doesn't go off in your brain, and it doesn't signal to your brain that we need to eventually, at some point, learn from this. So you are cheating your brain out of a learning experience and out of making the most out of failure when the time is appropriate, if you don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that as a, like, be selfish about this, right? You should learn. Yes. And I really wanted, like, keep it collective, which is if you are trying to build something, if you are trying to build something beyond yourself, you have to understand how deeply it can be, and you have to sit in it. It's like my view with failure, I kind of have like a 4-step process. I'm like, you got to grieve it, because this is how I've gotten through like ending up on TV, which I did process. I mean, we don't have time now. We're at the end of the show for me to tell you all my many failures, but there are a lot. There are a lot of things I've done where...
Well, we could have a failure festival.
We could have a failure festival. We could join everyone else. It's like the Fire Festival, right? Which was also a failure.
Also a huge monumental failure.
Huge failure, right? And then I think about them and I'm like, I hope they're off there somewhere, but some of them should have felt really bad about it. Because some failure is predictable and some isn't. That's what I also think. Like we always act as if, oh, you could have seen it all coming. And it's like, people never see stuff coming. Like maybe they should, but we never see it coming. And, you know, a lot of times we're giving things the benefit of the doubt, or we're holding on too long, whatever, right? So if you are in it, if you have failed, if somebody else has failed, if you have failed someone else, feel bad, grieve, then I do think it's like a little visit. Then you pay a little visit to it. You're like, oh, hey, there's that thing I did, or there's that thing that happened to me. What, as you say, what was the term you used? It's an error. An error has occurred, right?
It's an error detection, right? Error detection. Like it's a little flashing light going off in your brain that's like, whoa, we need to stop and we need to pay attention.
Yeah. I think, something's gone wrong, right? I'd say something's gone wrong. You'd say error detection, flashing light, all the same, right? And that can be whether it's life that's happened to you or whether you have happened to life. And then it's like, you cannot dwell in it forever, which is your rumination versus reflection point, I would say. You can't stay there forever. And then you've got to live. Like, we never even got to this. It's going to have to be a whole other show. I make a lot of jokes about how bad these things have been because they are funny now. They were funny at the time.
This is something you and I have bonded over, Melanie, is that we've both been told by other people that we use humor sometimes in very, very dark situations. And this is how we get through things. But I'm going to tell you, humor is great. When we talked about your limbic system, your emotional overload happening, humor is one of the quickest ways you can flip that switch, dampen down that big emotional response, and get yourself to a place where you're okay enough to move forward and start thinking and learning. So I love this.
Listen, I would say, like, again, I think, people used to say to me, they're like, oh my God, you just tell stories. You tell stories about these horrible things that happened to you as if they're nothing. And I think there was part of it, sometimes where I hadn't gone deep enough to be like, ugh. But sometimes it's like, yeah, because that's how you move through it, is you tell the story about the time when, you tell someone they love you and they say, oh my God, you've ruined everything. And it's like, it is like a punchline.
Is that a true story?
It's a true story.
No.
But it's also funny now, right? At the time, it was deeply traumatic. I probably went into every single, you mentioned so many brain parts today. It went into every single brain part you mentioned, but it is funny and it is a good story. And I don't know, I hate to say failure is a gift in the end, because I don't think that, but I think failure is a thing that is going to keep happening to us as long as we are alive. And even if we cloak ourselves and hide from the world, even if we cut ourselves off from everything beautiful and wonderful that we want, failure will keep happening to us. So we might as well learn how to feel it, shift, be compassionate.
Failure is a part of the human experience. And if you don't fail, you're not human. It's going to happen. And so we need to accept it and do the best we can, learn how to cope with it to the best of our ability, and move on. We're all just moving forward, doing the best we can. And if you can be like the marvelous Melanie Marshall and a little bit like me and use humor to help shift into a learning mode, do it. And one of the best things you can do is actually just to think of the funniest image you can think of. And that's a quick way to shift you into a little bit of humor. And I don't know about you, but one of my funny images I love is when it's wintertime and there are all the videos online of dogs with their little shoes on walking out in the snow. There's a certain percentage of dogs that really dislike wearing shoes or booties, and they walk with stick feet up like this, and they kind of look like little spiders. And that is one of the funniest things I have ever seen. So anytime I need to switch into humor, I just think of some of those videos of dogs walking in the snow with booties on, and they don't want to be there. Whatever you can do to engage in these coping mechanisms we've talked about today. So shifting from rumination to reflection, shifting from memories to translating those to experiences, and using humor when you can. Do it. Do it all. Do anything you can, because again, to fail is human, and that's okay. We're all going to fail.
We are. Like I fell off air. That's which is like, how hilarious is that for a show about failure?
It is. It is. And while you were gone, I mentioned one of the quickest things we can do to shift our brain from emotional overwhelm to humor is actually to think of the funniest image or funniest thing we can. And one of my favorite images is of dogs who have to walk in the snow and have booties on and hate having them. Do you have a favorite image you'd like to think of that's humorous to share with our viewers?
Not particularly. I think it's time to let you folks go. We've kept you a little longer than we intended. I just wanted to make sure I got back to say hi.
Hi.
Hi. I hope we have given you a little bit to think about. A few. Release the shame of your own failures. Maybe start to talk about them if you can. Feel them if you're not ready to talk about them. And Dr. Heather and go get your anterior singular cortex working.
Get your ear detection button fired up.
Yeah, I like that one better. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode on failure. We will be putting this out as a replay. We will be putting notes in so you guys can click ahead, find the bits you want, and join us on Tuesday, the 31st, for a webinar with our fabulous ladies, Kim Menninger and Yvonne Furneaux from the North Star Speaker Collective. We will be talking about going from noise to narrative, 4 ways to deal with the mess that is 2026. So
we all need that.
Who doesn't need that? That is also. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.